Alrighty. So today's call, the eternal self, which is going to be biblical insights on the nature of time, soul contracts, and creation itself. Um, so trying to keep such grand concepts as concise as possible should be fun. So hopefully I don't miss too much. There will be time at the end for sure. Um, if you guys have any ideas or questions that pop up through this. Um, but the eternal self, biblical views on concepts such as time, soul contracts, and creation. If everybody is ready, um, I'll start with the first verse I wanted to read. This is from the Psalm of David. Homeboy loved to write. This is from Psalm 139, starting in verse 11. It's impossible to disappear from you or to ask the darkness to hide me, for your presence is everywhere, bringing light into my night. There is no such thing as darkness with you. The night to you is as bright as the day. There's no difference between the two. So, right off the bat, he's setting the stage that from the perspective of the divine, these ideas of contrast or separation that we operate from on the human level at our level of consciousness in the world stage, those ideas of contrast don't exist from the highest creator level, right? We're gonna really get into that whenever we get to the end, to the nature of time and truly your eternal self. But just setting the stage here, this whole Psalm 139 is nuts. But starting off with that there is no difference between the two. And it goes from there to say, "You formed my innermost being, shaping my delicate inside and my intricate outside, and wove them all together in my mother's womb. I thank you, God, for making me so mysteriously complex. Everything you do is marvelously breathtaking. It simply amazes me to think about it, how thoroughly you know me, Lord. You even formed every bone in my body when you created me in the secret place. Carefully, skillfully, you shaped me from nothing to something. You saw who you saw who you created me to be before I became me. Before I'd ever seen the light of day, the number of days you planned for me were already recorded in your book. Every single moment you are thinking of me. How precious and wonderful to consider that you cherish me constantly in your every thought. Oh God, your desires toward me are more than the grains of sand on every shore. When I awake each morning, you're still with me." Okay. So this is, we're about to move out of this concept of your human life within the framework of time or having a beginning and end or a birth and a death. This is a guy, a human, the person who the Bible calls this is the only person referred to as a man after God's own heart. So he's getting the concept that there's nowhere I'm at that the presence of God is not. To the highest frame of consciousness, to the divine creator, there is no such thing as separation. There's really no such thing as light or dark, right? I see it all and I can see in it all. And the idea of this man getting the concept that whoever I am was planned out before I recall getting here. Okay, here in a minute, we're going to hear the same concept discussed from God when he's talking about it to another person, which gives us a glimpse into how things look from the creator level. But this is from the character level. And this is why I call it soul contract. So the way I like to compare a lot of times ourself as a human, right? We were known before we were formed, before our body came into being, and we existed. People have memories of us as children before we fully came online, right? We can't trace the moment of our beginning, the to the for the most part. So this guy, King David, is getting the idea that I was planned out before I got here. So from a soul contract level, the part of us that is the eternal self, the soul that was here before the body was formed and continues living after the body is not around anymore, had some idea of signing up to play this part, just like an actor signs up to play a role in a movie, right? Maybe it's the lead role, maybe they're an extra, maybe they're the villain, maybe they're the victim, maybe they're the hero, maybe they're the passerby, but they agreed, they read the script, they looked at the part, they said, okay, I'll go and do that. And then for a while, whatever that part is, they play it. Now, the people who, if you are somebody who gets into movies or performances or music or things like that, people who we can watch perform, the people who we enjoy the most, it almost doesn't even matter what the genre is, what the character is, what the subject matter is. We enjoy the people who are fully immersed in the role they're playing, in the performance they're giving. They're totally into it. And because they are so into the performance, it allows us to really feel into it with them, to go on the ride of the character they're performing as for us, right? But just like that character they agreed to play is not the beginning and end of that actor, of that performer. This is the nature of our human self, right? The days were numbered and written in the book before we even began, right? But the nature of us existed prior to that. We get into that more here in a second whenever God's kind of telling this same concept to Jeremiah. Um, but so far, Bobby Catherine, Lou Merrick, so far so good. Okay, so whole point of this, just stripping away the ideas that from the human perspective, it starts to become aware that outside of our perspective, from the highest perspective, from the God perspective, there is no such thing as separation. There is no difference between light and dark. Those are just concepts of contrast that we use while we are here playing through the realm of duality through which to return to the truest nature of who I am, right? When I no longer need comparison and contrast in order to see myself or explore myself. That was just part of the human experience. And as we are leaving that, it starts to become obvious that God doesn't see things that way. And that whatever I have come to experience myself as was something that was formed secondarily and something that I stepped into for a predetermined amount of time through which to play out a sequence of key scenes, right? Can play them however I want, can show up and perform and carry whatever energy, whatever attitude, whatever, however playful or serious I want to do it. But the key scenes have already been written out and mapped out, and they're going to come to pass. Okay. So that is the area where people argue about predestiny and free will. And that's another subject that I won't recircle back to, but those are both happening at the same time. Predestiny and free will are happening at the same time all the time. Okay, now moving from that one, from the Psalm of David, which was in Psalms 139, verse starting at verse 11 and moving through 16. Sorry, through 18. So moving from that to Jeremiah, chapter 1, verse 5. And this is God speaking. Yahweh God, Yahweh spoke these words to me, to Jeremiah. Before I shaped you in the womb, I knew you intimately. I had divine plans for you before I gave you life, and I set you apart and chose you to be mine. You are my prophetic gift to the nations. This is just funny. I'm adding this part in just because we're here. I replied, but Lord Yahweh, I don't know how to speak in public. Besides, I'm too young. But Yahweh interrupted me. Do not use your youth as an excuse, for you will go wherever I send you, and you will speak whatever I tell you to say. Fear nothing when you confront the people, for I am with you, and I will protect you. Okay, but back to the main point of this. God, the creator God, talking to a guy, said, I shaped you, and before I shaped you in the womb, I knew you intimately. Okay, so this is like for anybody that wants to look at the Bible as a source of like core common consciousness material, right? That everybody's kind of aware of this source of material. And it's just so dense that it's very easy to just breeze right past the fact that almost every line is trying to give us something huge. Before I shaped you in the womb, I knew you intimately. So the you that he's talking to existed before the body that was formed in the womb, right? So this is another nod from God addressing the eternal self. The soul, you, I knew you intimately before I shaped you in the womb. there's two ways to look at this. The you that you are, the individual that you are, existed as an intimately known uh, individuation, as an intimately known self, as an intimately known individual to God before your human physical vessel was formed in the womb. Okay, so this is a nod from God that who we are, our eternal self, is truly eternal, existed before the body, but also this is a hint at the nature of creation for you yourself to start moving out of the me as a person. I'm leaving me behind. That's sort of that King David space where you start seeing things from the broader perspective. And once you can see it from that perspective, and you begin looking yourself through that perspective, you begin stepping more into unity with God and becoming one where you are seeing things from the creator level. So after, and this is a couple of books after David, right? So if we're reading this chronologically and as we're reading it, moving through our own level of awareness, okay, so David got it. There's no such thing as contrast. Light and dark are the same. All of my days were numbered in the books of God, and I was made so miraculously, and that God's thoughts are with me every second of every day, no matter where I go, no matter what I do. God is thinking of me constantly, right? And realizing what a blessing that is. Now, here's God saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you intimately. I had divine plans for you before I gave you life. Okay, so you existed before your life as a human began. And these plans were sort of written out again, much like the idea of a character in a story or a part to play in a role to play in a movie, right? So that idea is there. But also from God's perspective, the idea of creating, the idea of being, you could look at it as a co-creator for at first, but eventually you will just be the creator, looking at it from this direction. So before anything comes into being, you have to know it intimately. And what you do know intimately will form into being, right? So this is what we talked about before, that reality will bend in the absence of doubt. Like Jesus said several times, it'll be as you've believed. Your faith has made it so. If you just have
I did pretty good.
somebody's
It's
getting
a bad day.
all right. So the idea that your belief has made it so. If you have the tiniest amount of faith, you can move mountains. Um, that sort of thing. You can walk on water. You can create miracles. So the idea of removing doubt, removing questions, removing almost a need to even know how things work or why things work, but just trusting I want, and this is it, and allowing yourself to know it fully. This is a key that God is dropping to Jeremiah. Before I shaped you in the womb, I knew you intimately. You existed before you even knew you existed, right? Before you can't remember while you're here. That's part of the game, part of the fun of the human experience. You couldn't have a human experience if you fully remembered everything that you are and that you were and that you knew before you plopped in here on earth, right? You came here for this, and I knew you intimately. But also, the process of creation is that you have to know it intimately. The more fully, the more tangibly you can know a thing in your mind, not just imagine it, not necessarily just wonder about it, not have hopes or doubts about it, but know it fully, intimately. Then it will start to crystallize into form. Hope and curiosity are tremendous ways to move into something new. Otherwise, we're just repeating the familiar, and that only happens from the ego level, right? Because up until a certain point, we only know ourselves and remember ourselves from the human experience. Once we start getting beyond that, we're leaving contrast. We're looking through the eyes of eternity, where light and dark are the same. And we're no longer seeing ourselves as a miraculous part of creation that can only exist because God is thinking of us constantly. But now we're looking at it through the eyes of the Creator that says, before I formed you, I knew you intimately. From this place, we can start to take our own personal power and responsibility with keeping check about what sort of things we are constantly playing through our minds, what sort of things we are constantly latching on to. in the whirlwind of options circling around in our head, which ones do we grab and which ones do we let pass by? And what sort of things do we hold on to in our consciousness, not in our thinking mind, but in our consciousness, right? We're feeling from that eternal level where we're not just being human, we are being actual creators. What sort of things do we start to become one with and know intimately? Those things will materialize into a lived experience. So far, so good. Cool. And if you guys have any ideas or have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm flipping to the next the next one, which is in Ecclesiastes 3:15. I've talked about this verse a couple times before because I love it, but it bears repeating because it's so easy to just skip right past it. How are they just going to throw something like this just in there and just keep breezing right on in the middle of all the rest of the poetry of this verse? Um, Ecclesiastes 3, verse 15. Whatever has happened is present now. Whatever is going to happen has already happened. God will call the past to account. All right. So simple, so easy to skip right by it. Whatever has happened is present now. So whatever is past is present now. Whatever is going to happen, future, has already happened, past. Right. So the past is now, the future is past, which is also now. So it's really trying to like in a sentence just point out the fact that the idea of time is really all right now. Everything where we begin looking at it across time is just the process of playing out things through the frame of an experience, right? Just like if you hold a DVD in your hand or hold a book in your hand, the whole story is right there. But it only starts occupying time when we play it out and when we watch it in sequence, right? Otherwise, you can just hold the whole thing in your hand, a record, a book, a CD. You get the idea. The whole thing exists right now, right? Until you want to play it out at some length of time and just experience it at a different rate, which is all the human experience is moving through these stories, these experiences, these things that can't truly be felt this way when you are fully knowing and remembering yourself as one with the creator, as the creator indistinguishable, right? Like not apart from. These ideas of separation and isolation and apart fromness are the key elements that allow the human experience to be experienced and then ultimately transcended and returned back to self as infinite and untouchable. Okay. So the idea, the number of times where, that it's super common, the phrase where God says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. Jesus says, I'm the Alpha and the Omega. I'm the beginning and the end. Right. Well, if you're both of those, you're neither of those, right? The idea of a beginning and an ending is what? It didn't say I existed before the beginning and I exist after the end. I am the beginning and I am the ending, which is all right now, right? If I'm all of it, I'm still here right now. So if there's no beginning or no end, because by definition, infinity and eternity have neither a start nor a finish, then what am I? I am, right? I simply am. That is it. I am. The eternal you is simply having an experience as part of nature. The human of itself is just another aspect of life on earth, right? The physical body has a mind of its own. It's got cells and instincts and impulses and desires, and all of that is just like any other aspect of nature. It's just like the cycles of rain. It's just like every other animal that chooses to procreate and live and socialize. Um, and it is only your conscious awareness that makes being a human seem any different than anything else on earth. But it's all part of the same ecosystem. The questions that we ask, you start asking, how did I get here? Or where am I going? Right? Like once we become self aware, how did I get here? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What happens once this body perishes? Right? This is the eternal questions where we just choose to fill in all kinds of We choose to come up with all kinds of explanations and all kinds of meaning and all kinds of religion and superstition and all this stuff. When in reality, asking those questions is what creates infinite roads, right? Infinite paths through which to explore, to which to hypothesize and test our hypotheses concerning those questions. How did I get here? Where am I going? But all of those infinite roads lead to the only truth. I am now and forever. I don't know where I started, and I won't know an end, right? I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the beginning and the end. I have no beginning. I have no end. Okay. I simply am. I can't recall having come somewhere first, nor will I ever know what an end is like. I can just be aware that at the moment I'm having a human experience. And from this perspective, I can feel a little bit of separation from God, although there is no such thing as separation. The number of days and the purpose of my life here on this earth was planned out and agreed upon. I am known intimately before all of this even got orchestrated, and I agreed to have this experience. So the idea of having existed through the conscious willpower of the divine creator is a reminder that at no point can we ever, no matter where we go, be separate from the connection to the divine, right? So what does that have to do with me? How does that become a personal thing that's flowing through me? Bobby made a comment. Which do you think is more interesting to live in? The finite now, the finite not knowing about the infinite, or living in the infinite and not knowing it? We are constantly going back and forth. The idea of a form of stasis, a form of never-ending stillness, um, that is the origin and the reset point. It is the space between each breath, right? Where things are neither growing nor dying, neither expanding nor contracting. That space of stillness has a moment in time, just like the space between breaths. Uh, from a cosmic level, from an eternal God standpoint, that is the moment where God fully embraces the self as the I am and has no more questions and has no need in that moment for connection or for company, right? But that nothing stays there, in the sense that things are always in flux and things always exist all at the same time. But back to the illustration I used in the Ascension book, if you look at a book that's sitting on a shelf, it takes up time and space as we are reading through it and as our consciousness is imagining it, right? Because things only exist through our conscious effort. But once I put it down, like, it stays forever. The part of the story stays forever on that page. So that is the nature of things remaining the same in eternity. It's always sitting there to be played out again through conscious awareness. But how does this work as a creator if you're looking at the mechanisms of creation, right? The mechanisms of creation exist in response to will, not just as independent mechanisms. Because if there were mechanisms like tools, like systems, like processes that existed that we're supposed to somehow figure out how they work so that we can handle them and become better craftsmen of creating realities, of creating lived experiences, those mechanisms would be effectively like Neo breaking out of the Matrix, right? It's just like another level of a construct, because somebody would have had to have created those mechanisms. They would have had to have been built in order for us to learn how to use them, right? But the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, the singularity, self-aware consciousness, how did it form creation from simply being self-aware consciousness? Nothing else exists but I am, right? So how else does anything else come into being? It is almost exactly the same way as when you are dreaming, especially if you have practiced or accidentally had lucid dreams, where in your dream you start to want something, or you start to want to have something happen, and it does, or you're at least aware enough to sort of move through it consciously. What creates the construct of your experience in your dreams? What changes the dynamics of like the physics in your dreams? What answers your questions when you ask them in your dream? It's happening in your own space. So everybody you're interacting with is a part of your subconscious that's simply responding to your will, right? So the mechanisms of creation are not individual, independent tools and systems and machines and things like that. Creation responds in accordance with your will, and they play off of each other. Cool. Say that again. The mechanisms of creation exist in response to will. You don't have to go on some treasure hunt to find the fountain of youth, or whatever things we've seen in like Indiana Jones type movies and all that stuff. There's not some secret text that has yet to be written or has been buried for thousands of years that if we could just find it, it will give us the answer. Seeking answers, the desire to find an answer creates a road to travel down. And all roads lead to the truth that I am. I have no beginning, I have no end. I am the beginning, I am the end. I am only at this moment experiencing and perceiving myself through this framework, through this level of consciousness. And from here, I'm human. What does that mean? Technically, it means I am the first person point of view of God. Like David said, your thoughts are with me constantly because I don't exist separate from the thoughts of the creator, right? I must be known intimately and I must be thought about at all times. Otherwise, I would cease to be here in this framework. I would go back to a knowing of self through some other context. Is this one a little too far out, or is it coming across fairly simply, I hope. Also, Bobby, back to your question. Which do you think is more interesting? You can tell which is more interesting because it's the space where you're at. The moment something else is of greater interest to you, the the experience you're having will shift. Just like you said last week, how you just felt like selling your things and like lightening your load to materialism and allowing your spirit to feel lighter. Um, you are moving through what you find interesting at the time. Maybe next year maybe you'll totally switch. Maybe you will be wildly interested in materialism, right? Maybe you will be totally fascinated with how to build $1 billion empire. Um, I think what this is describing is the illusion. Anyways, Bobby, where I was going with that is what interests you starts to come alive within you, what you start to feel a tangible connection with inside of you starts to become a vision that you know to be true in your mind, in your feeling. That's that known intimately place where now you are um, moving from a creator, co-creator stance. Now we're still here. We're in the human experience, right? But hopefully we are all letting any ideas or veils of separation slip away more and more. So as I see other people, I see no difference between me, them, and God, all as one, right? The triune God, right? I'm in my Father, you're in me, and I'm in you. What you do for the least of these, you do for me, type of thing. Forgive them; they don't know what they do, because that's me over there, right? I do not want me to get heavily punished for that dumb shit that I can see me doing, right? Like I'm sometimes oblivious to what Cleburne, am doing, but I can spot it when I see somebody else, and I catch myself being halfway like judgmental. I'm like, oh wait, okay, whatever I think I'm being like knowing better than about is something that I'm messing up personally. So let me chill out here and establish a rule set that I want to be held accountable to. What is the rule set I want to be held accountable to? Gentle accountability, right? And forgiveness, and not having to get my ass kicked over and over to get my attention. You dig? So the framework of consciousness you choose to hold, um, by definition, creates the reflection of the world that's going to reflect back to you and give you your lived experience. The mechanisms of creation exist in response to will. And like I've said several times, all things will become as I am, right? It's an unavoidable process that we are all making our way back to ever increasing levels of connection and of unity, and ultimately back into that space of singularity, that space of oneness, that moment between the breaths where God is no longer exhaling nor inhaling, but it's that space. Um, right? The universe in theory is expanding, if we believe what they say. Started from nothing, big bang out, expanded out. What does an atom do when you split it? In theory, if we really think that's how the atomic bombs work, you split an atom and they create such a massive chain reaction of energy that it goes way out and then it comes right back, right? It contracts. So if that's a similar concept to how the universe began from nothingness to just boom, and it's still expanding, if we believe that our tools are accurate and we can observe that the universe is expanding, we kind of know that what expands eventually contracts. So that same moment of the Big Bang, when everything comes back to like one, that moment between God exhaling and inhaling, where we are all reconnected, um, that moment will come. But at this moment, here's where we're at. And we're here by agreement. This was all planned out. We existed, and then we were known intimately before we even got formed in the womb, right? And then we were planned out how many days, sort of what the theme of our life was going to be. And we agreed. We signed up for it, just like an actor agrees to play a role. Some of them, if you guys get into hearing actors talk about their different experiences, some of them were more enjoyable, some of them required more work, some of them were they did it just to do it. You know what I mean? They weren't great. Um, so from day to day, maybe we have different feelings like that. But this whole concept is that moving from the human experience, where David becomes aware that there's no such thing as a difference between light or dark. There's also no such thing as being separate from the thoughts of God, right? At all times, God is thinking about you. That is what is animating you, right? God saying, I knew you intimately before I formed you. That's just like the nature of how this works isn't something we're going to solve and intellectually, like we're not going to figure out the mechanics of it and then what are we going to do, patent it and sell it as a course or sell it as a tool that we can offer to people, like here's how things are created by God and also now by you, right? We make what commercials about it and stuff. No, the nature of creation, the mechanisms of creation exist in response to will, much the same way as how you navigate yourself when you are aware while dreaming. And this sounds counterintuitive, but the more you can let your life feel like a lucid dream as you begin lucid living and really start letting go of any desire to know how it works or any need to feel like you're controlling it, that's actually what gives you more control. It lets you let go because everything has to respond to your will, right? It's just going to happen. Because you are not separate from any aspect. Not one atom from the farthest reaches of the universe is separate from you. Okay. Even when we're looking at it scientifically, when you look at the concepts of quantum entanglement and stuff like that, that say very simply, when you look at any number of these experiments that just kind of illustrate the unbreakable connection between things that have been connected in the past. What happens to one is present in the other, regardless how far apart they are, light years apart, happens instantly. So if we like the idea that everything came from the same source, everything came from a singular frame of material for the Big Bang, and it's moving out, none of it is disconnected. It just can kind of appear that way depending on where you're zoomed in at. Lou, I can't tell if you're like having one of those days, or if this is just like
No, I just had like a crazy idea and I'm just drawing something that's nothing. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. I'm doing fine. I just had to, it's a picture, but whatever. I've been having these wild dreams, that's why. And I'm just drawing something down. That's all. I'm good.
okay,
I'm good.
Jessica, how did you mean? I think what this is describing is the illusion.
Sorry, you caught me with food in my mouth. So, like, if we are the beginning and we are the end,
Uh-huh.
then that's the illusion because it's like the we, as the avatar, we are experiencing all that we can through this lens. And then as soon as like this specific lens ends, when we transition,
Uh-huh.
it's like, we continue, right? As you said, where there's no beginning, there is no end. Like we are the beginning and the end. But
Yeah.
like I don't know how to describe it any better than that. It just feels like what you were saying is like basically the explanation of how the illusion shows up, where it's like sort of giving you permission to not have to think, um, like it just sort of gives you that answer. Like even though it's not an answer, it's sort of like, okay, this is what it is. And so just be here now, be present and experience it because
Yeah.
yeah, do you know what I'm trying to say? It's like it's very thick. It's hard to describe, but I feel like you did a really good job. And at the end of it, I was just like, yep, that's the illusion of it.
Wherever you're at with the truth of what interests you and what you're feeling or what you are believing to be a truth is what has to be reflected back to you. Um, yeah, and the answers we get to the questions we get sometimes don't always make sense when we need them to make logical sense. They can't, because from that perspective, we're effectively trying to ask God level questions from a human level frame of understanding. And that's just like if you're an adult and you walk into a kindergarten class, right? And they start asking you questions about the questions that kids ask, right? Like they ask such grandiose questions about the nature of how things came to be. They really are curious about these questions that basically we beat them out of ourselves while we're growing up. Adults like just have enough of these questions that can't be answered. And the kids demand some kind of it. They're curious. And then we stop asking until we ask again, and then we just need to come up with some BS answer. When a lot of times, yeah, the truth is, it just is. It just is a reflection of being back to you. Um, so yeah, from that framework, how how much do you need to create roads for yourself to go down to always wind up back at the truth that I am? And at least knowing that that's what's happening um, makes any road you're down feel a lot less permanent and feel a lot less heavy and a lot less challenging or threatening. It's just a place we're going down that ends with the same knowing. Oh yeah, I am. There is no way I can like define or trace my beginning or my ending because in order to do that, to define something, there has to be a context outside of it, beyond it, right? And there is no such thing as beyond infinity, as beyond eternity, as beyond the singular source consciousness through which the imagination sparked everything into being. So the need to have an answer, the need to have a definition, especially the need to try to define something that fits within the human intellect is an impossibility. If it were going to be done, it might have been done by now. We've been around for, a little while. Humans seem to be able to accomplish all kinds of great things. Um, I mean, I have personally experienced flying on an airplane and using Wi-Fi at the same time, like texting someone and watching a movie. That seems pretty nonsensical. If I really try to explain how any of that worked, I would go cross-eyed, even trying to attempt to research the science behind all that shit. How we are talking to each other right now, how the electricity works when I flip the switch, right? If you really dig into anything far enough, it stops making sense entirely. Um, right? You look like you're about to say something, Merrick. Hit me.
So I've noticed that it's not necessarily that the things don't make sense per se, but the higher you go up in like any scientific and some art studies, like towards more niche knowledge, the more it just all meshes together and it's kind of it just gets messier. So
Yeah.
it defies our yeah, but it also makes more sense. Like if you can understand higher concepts in one area, it seems to translate at some point across higher concepts in other fields that are tangentially related. But
Yeah.
that might just be a perspective.
I agree. Um, the connection of it all seems to be a big theme as well. Like at some point, the higher you go, the deeper you look, the more willing you are to really sort of like get to the bottom of something. It leads back to, wait a minute, none of this can work independent of anything else, right? Like everything is in harmony, in connection, woven together at all times. So that is like moving back along to the path that if all things are connected and I'm part of all things and I'm not separate from anything and I'm, you know what I mean? Like, so if I'm connected to everything, what is the difference between me and anything else? Simply perspective. But the only truth is I am. Yeah. That is the simplest way for me to draw it to sort of an anchor point that's easy to quickly draw back to when I catch myself feeling anxious, when I catch myself wondering too much or needing an answer too much or looking for a way to have meaning. The moment I need there to be meaning, my brain will very subtly like and immediately whip up some bullshit that seems reasonable enough that I'll be like, yep, that's what's going on here. That's what this means. But really, that need to find a meaning, to ask myself to lie to me, covertly lie to me, is all I've really created by needing an answer. Versus, what's it like if I'm? It's almost while I'm here being a human and I can grasp how all this works. It's almost like becoming a child again, like a child of God. It feels a lot like the night before Christmas, where I don't know what's going to happen. Somebody else took care of it. Everything's going to be good. I don't really have to worry about it. I didn't have to pay for it. I didn't have to wrap it. I'm just involved in the process and I'm enjoying it as it goes, right? Like that is as far as I can tell, the gift of the human experience, but that's also a lot like the way that God the creator has all of this to experience. And it's a lot like the same way you dream while you're dreaming. It's effortless and it just happens. And the more you try to look at it and analyze it and figure out how and why it's happening, it slows everything down, right? And it creates um, areas of not just confusion, but areas that become unanswerable because we have stopped to ask rather than just accept and surrender to the natural forward momentum of that everything is a response to our will. But that is it. That is the main point I wanted to make, which was a few points, I guess. But again, if we're looking at the Bible as a source of at least potentially um, profound, deep spiritual insights that can often be times told through such a ground level human experience that it just looks like very applicable and sensible logic in some cases. Sometimes it looks like total BS. The rules and social structures and ideas don't jive in all times and in all places. But if we're at least looking at it, even if someone is not someone who necessarily says I believe in or this is my go-to source for information, but it's at least something worth considering because it is a massive body of work that is the most sold set of books in the world and all that stuff. And likewise, somebody who might say I'm a total Bible thumper and this is the true and written word of God and it's all truth. Well, okay, buddy, if that's the case, you're gonna have to quit breezing right past it and actually look at what it's saying. And a number of these things it's saying are basically time isn't real. You have and will always exist. God knew you before your body was formed. And while you're in your body and you're trying to grasp these concepts, at some point you're going to start to become aware that these ideas of separation, these ideas of light and dark don't really exist except while looking through the human perspective, which is where you're at right now. You can embrace it, you can enjoy it, and by doing so, that counterintuitively puts you more into oneness with God. It makes you more like the creator to just accept that I am. And as I am being, the mechanisms of creation will exist and move in response to my will. Not because I have to figure out the perfect spell to cast, not because I have to figure out the perfect day and time to, go sun my butthole outside and unlock my secret DNA codes and all this stuff. All that's just for fun. But the reality is, if I stop letting my human mind kick into gear and have to think, and I can just truly resonate from the knowing that I am, and as I am, and as I am being, the mechanisms of creation must exist in response to me, to the truth of me, to my will, and reality will reflect that back to me, right? In order to need to know how that works, I will be needing to subconsciously create a way to explain how that works. But the explanation was also created by me so that I could find it and so that I could understand it and so that I could learn about it, right? But if the infinite alpha and omega that has no beginning and no end, that just is, how did that put everything into being, right? Just did it. Yeah. Don't always need to know how a clock works to be able to tell what time it is. Yes.
So, like, one thing that I think about all the time is like, when you see a construction site, and I know nothing about building anything, plumbing, electricity, all that stuff, right? And you see this building go up, but you never see humans in the building. Like, you never see the construction workers. And like, I always think about that as like, that's like proof of God, right? We are all like creating these things. And like, we know that, like you were saying about the Wi Fi, right? Like we know that someone somewhere is making this work, but I don't actually have the proof. Like you and I have talked about the unrendered world.
Yeah.
There's so much of this unrendered world. And like, I don't know, it just feels like a lot of what you're talking about here, where it's just like, you know, just another sort of like example of what you're saying. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Mhm. Yes. Hey, by the way, while you're talking, the group might get a kick out of it. Mention the story you told me earlier, the Menard story.
Okay. So I do the monthly fast and I love it and I always get like beautiful, beautiful rewards. And this time, like I literally broke the fast. It was like 2 p.m. And my partner and bonus kids and I were deciding, what to do with our afternoon. And we needed to go to Menards to get mulch for the yard. And so I go into my jacket closet and it's a little bit of like a chilly day here in Michigan, but like I go for this jacket. I didn't want to wear my normal jacket. I like needed to wash it. And so I decided I'm going to pick up a different jacket to wear to the store. And there's this gray jacket that I don't like. It's not a pretty color. It's just been hanging in this closet forever. But I'm like, it's warm enough. I'm going to put this on for the day. And I put it on and I stick my hand in the pocket and I shit you guys not. There was a Menards rebate check in there for $47. Now, Menards is not a shop that I go to very often.
It's four
Again,
and
this
seven.
jacket hadn't been worn in over a year. It just like was God winking at me, being like, here you go. Congratulations. You completed another fast. And every time I complete a fast, something happens. This one was just very funny.
What's 4 and 7 in numerology?
So the 4 is foundations and building. So I guess that kind of makes sense because that's what I was doing. I was like working on our yard because it needed it. And then the 7 is introspection and enlightenment. So it was like definitely a wink from God. And then there was also $8 in the pocket. And the number 8, which is the infinity symbol, has been following me around, honestly, since Cleburne did that amazing podcast on December 8th of, I think it was what, 23. That makes sense.
Here's one more for you.
Yeah, the infinity symbol. So if you guys aren't doing the fast, I highly recommend them. I love them.
Thanks, Jessica, for a cool story. Alrighty. Does anybody have any questions or any parts of that you want to touch back on again? I always feel like I'm going through these pretty quickly, and then if I rewatch them, I'm like, okay, I guess that was all right. Um, but a lot of this stuff is like if it's the first time you're touching on some of these subjects, it's worth rethinking about or revisiting or rereading some of the things a time or two because they'll look differently each time you come back to it. And that's kind of the intended purpose, I suppose. None of this is a one and done because as far as I can tell, that goes against the nature of all of us as infinite. Yeah. And yeah, just a reminder, the consciousness, the singular source consciousness is what creates all things. The mechanisms of creation respond to the will, to the thoughts of, you can call it God. I knew you intimately before I formed you is an unbreakable connection, right? That's that conscious connection, that psychic connection, that intimately known as intimate, right? Like when especially the Bible, the context of the origins of these words, when they're talking about intimately, it doesn't just mean sexually, but it means that close, right? It means like one. I know you intimately. We are one. We are one and the same. So prior to hearing God talk about it, when we just hear David, a human, which is us not too long ago, becoming aware of this stuff, um, and the awareness he's having, which is every single moment you are thinking of me, how precious and wonderful to consider that you cherish me constantly in your every thought. O God, your desires toward me are more than the grains of sand on every shore. When I awake each morning, you're still with me, right? Every single moment you're thinking of me, you cherish me constantly in your every thought. I mean, have we ever like not thought of that as a pain in the ass, but thought of that like, wow, like whatever I have imagined is behind all of this is literally thinking of me with its every thought, right? Because whether you have really fully sunk your teeth into this or not, you are the first person point of view that God is having, right? That is why you are self-aware and experiencing yourself and everything you're having. You are the seat through which God is viewing and having a human experience. And because of that, you can recall that your tether to the creator cannot be broken, right? As a matter of fact, you are driven by the fact that every single thought the creator is having is of you. Believe it or not, even on your shittiest days where you're wondering, oh God, why me? You are God's favorite because you are the set of eyes that it is looking through. And you are the emotions and the senses that it is feeling through, right? So that unbreakable connection that becomes aware, becomes tangible when we, a few steps before that, become aware that there's actually no such thing as separation. There's no such thing as light or dark. And before I even became aware of myself as Cleburne, living a story here in a body and in a place and with some people, um, I was already known. I was known intimately by the Creator that is saying, we are one, we are connected. And everything else from that point on is a story that plays out. It is your questions of how did I get here and where am I going that create infinite roads for you to explore down in search of whatever it is you think is going to answer your question. And all roads lead to the only truth. I am. And an extra bonus quote that I love saying because I know this to be very true, all things will become as I am. So, as you are is the way in which reality, your lived experience, will reflect you back to you. So, what are we choosing with our thoughts? How are we using our human mind to use it to get out of its own way, to get out of our way, so we can settle back into a knowing of ourselves as I am and knowing from that place what we know intimately, what we feel, what we allow to be repeated and entertained and attached to in our mind's eye, in our inner feeling, and in our thoughts. That is what the mechanisms of creation must respond to and literally create, right? That is our world building power by being aware of what we're doing in our thoughts and in our feelings, in our conscious awareness. It sounds so simple. It sounds non-physical, right? Like the external is the illusion to some degree. It all comes from the eternal. I knew you intimately before I formed you in the womb, right? And there weren't physical hands going into your mom's womb. We've yet to see anybody's hands externally, physically, tangibly start working inside a mom's womb. It just happens invisibly, right? Your world building power is invisible, just like when you are dreaming and you reshape or alter or direct your dreamed experience, it is happening through you, because of you, and by you, yet fully unknown to you while it's happening. Okay. This is the nature of how you move as a creator in your living, waking, lucid life. It's paradoxical, yeah, but that's how it works. Okay. That's it for today. I'll quit yapping. Gotta love the hippie vibes. Thank you, Merrick. Always. Um, I love you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Um, yeah, this will be up shortly in the classroom for anybody who wants to review it later. Other than that, I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see y'all soon.